Pablo Escobar during this time. We love Pablo. We will die for Pablo.
That's death walking on the earth. That's unbelievable. That's how violent this guy is.
When it comes to drug lords, no one is more legendary or notorious than the king of cocaine, Pablo Escobar. At one point, the sole leader of the Medellin cartel was responsible for shipping 70 to 80 tons of coke into the United States on a monthly basis. In fact, his cartel owned approximately 80% of the overall global cocaine market and raked in $500 million each week. Alas, the drug business does not run itself, and Escobar would take every measure necessary to ensure that he remained at the top of the food chain. He set up a team of extremely ruthless and brutal hitmen who would kill pretty much anyone who threatened the business. This army of assassins, known as sicarios, answered to him and him alone. Their job descriptions included kidnapping, murdering, bombing, torturing, and much more.
Pablo's real power base was this third row of people here. All those guys, and they're called sicarios. Sicario is a Spanish word for assassin. These are people who would give their lives for Pablo Escobar. These were the tough guys. I mean, no remorse, just kill you in a heartbeat. Hey, go kill that guy. Okay, bam, let's go get lunch. It was that cold. It was unbelievable.
And in today's video, we're going to take a look at where some of these killers are today. So without further ado, let's jump into it. First off, let's talk about Pablo's chief hitman, Jean Jairo Velasquez. Velasquez was more famously known as Popeye because of his resemblance to the cartoon character. He later changed his somewhat animated appearance by getting plastic surgery. But don't be fooled by the cartoon reference. In the 1980s, he was one of the most dangerous and dreaded men in all of Colombia. Pablo's #1 lieutenant had oversight over the entire web of assassins and was responsible for making sure no one ever acted against the interest of the cartel. It is believed that he and his army didn't even wait for evidence. The second they suspected someone was an informant, the person would be dead. Popeye has confessed to carrying out 257 murders in Colombia. And if you thought that number was terrifying, this guy also arranged the murders of over 3,000 targets during the prime of the cartel. Yes, that's right, 3,000. And this is only what we have on record. Who knows how many more lives he took? He once admitted that he got his first kill when he was just 17 years old.
¿Cómo aprendió a matar? Me dice a los 12 años. ¿Usted se recuerda cuándo y a quién fue la primera persona que mató?
No, ya el primero que yo maté fue por el 17 años de edad. Fue a un despachador de buses que cuando el primero era conductor de bus y había tumbado la mamá de un amigo nuestro. Cuando conducía, no esperó que se bajara y no que la señora se iba a bajar y se cayó y la mató. Y la dejó ahí tirada como un perro, entonces ese fue mi primer asesinato.
Popeye was once in a relationship with a woman called Wendy Chavarriaga Hill. One day, he was lying in bed with her when the phone rang, and when he picked it up, he heard a recording of her speaking with DEA agents. His boss then gave him an option, plato o plomo, meaning silver or lead. And Popeye ended up ordering 3 of his henchmen to murder his own girlfriend in a restaurant.
Entonces yo paso así para respaldar a los muchachos. Entonces ya los muchachos en las motos sacan los sicarios y yo la miro así muerta en un charco de sangre ahí, y ahí terminó mi relación con Wendy.
During the Medellin cartel's war against their rivals and the Colombian state, he masterminded around 200 of Pablo's infamous car bombings. In 1989, he also organized the horrific bombing of the commercial airline Avianca Flight 203. The sicarios snuck a bomb onto the plane because they wanted to assassinate the leading presidential candidate, Cesar Gaviria Trujillo, before the 1990 elections. Mid-flight, the plane exploded and all 107 people on board were dead. What's shocking is that Trujillo wasn't even on the flight, and he would go on to win the 1990 election to become the president of Colombia. So yeah, those 107 people died because of an incorrect assumption. The same year, Popeye also assassinated presidential candidate Luis Carlos Gallan, and to date, that's the only murder he was ever convicted for. Velasquez was an accomplished kidnapper as well, and carried out some super high-profile abductions, including that of Attorney General Carlos Marro Hoyos. If there's one thing you need to know about the bandits, it's that they were completely fearless.
Nosotros no pensamos ni en la cárcel ni en la muerte, íbamos para adelante. Y al otro día nos matan el mejor amigo, el otro día se moría otro amigo, todos los días.
¿Cómo se vive eso, por ejemplo, cuando le matan al mejor amigo, cuando le matan al hermano, cuando le matan a la novia?
Se sale a matar a los que lo mataron. Ese es el aliciente, la guerra.
La venganza.
La venganza, y fuerte. Así sepa que lo están buscando a uno y que hay 300 policías, que hay 1500 salir. Usted ya, su amigo ya, no se puede ni ir al velorio. Nada, tan y sale.
Because of his extremely crucial role in Escobar's criminal enterprise, Popeye had accumulated a fortune that was almost as vast and glorious as his leaders. But when Pablo went down in 1992, Popeye was finally taken into custody. For the next 23 years, he spent his time behind bars on charges of terrorism, drug trafficking, extortion, and of course, murder. After his release in 2014, he claimed that there was around an 80% chance he was going to be assassinated. This, however, did not motivate him to lay low, and instead he became a famous social media personality. He was active on his YouTube channel called Popeye Arrepentido, where he would often share his old stories and conservative political views with his 1.2 million subscribers. He claimed that being a professional killer was like a day at the office for him. He didn't feel anything after carrying out a murder. Not shame, not sadness, not happiness. It was rumored that after his release, he continued to stay involved in criminal activities. Guess once you leave the straight and narrow, it's not easy to come back. In 2017, he published a book where he mainly talked about his time in prison. Netflix soon capitalized and released a TV series called Surviving Pablo Escobar, based on his memoir. He also appeared in several films and documentaries. And then, in 2018, it all came to an end when he was arrested for extortion and breaking the rules of his probation. He would never breathe free air ever again. 2 years later, on February 6, 2020, the former hitman passed away. Not in a cinematic hail of bullets or a bomb blast, but because of a painful battle with stomach cancer. He spent his last few weeks receiving care at the National Cancer Institute.
In the beginning, after a great
Bogota. Next on the list is Denise Munoz Mosquera, who went by the nickname La Kika. He was known to be the most deadliest and ruthless hitman in Pablo's employment, and you know that's saying a lot.
Of all the sicarios, this guy right here, this is La Kika. He's probably the most notorious, one of the most dangerous sicarios that Pablo had working for him.
His murders weren't just limited to fellow criminals or government officials. This man once blew up an entire daycare center for children just to get some police officers. Yep, not even kids were out of bounds for the cartel. La Kika personally trained the assassins on Pablo's massive sicario squad, rumored to be numbered in the thousands at the height of his power. He commanded 140 of them, most of whom were teenagers he would hire from the slums of Medellin. They would usually have no other option to make money and would end up working for the cartel to feed themselves and their families.
Pablo would go, hug him, kiss him, he'd give him money. Everybody wanted to work for Pablo Escobar during this time. Great leadership skills. In fact, I remember speaking to one of the sicarios after Escobar declares war on Colombia. The kid, he was 14 years old, admitted to me he had already killed 10 police officers at $100 a head because of the orders of Escobar. He said, we love Pablo, we will die for Pablo. He said, our life expectancy in Medellin is about 22, 23 years old. So we never realized that Pablo's base, that power base, was based on the sicarios. This guy was probably Escobar's most favorite sicarios. Then Denny Munoz Mosquera, they called him La Kika.
La Kika didn't shy away from getting his hands dirty. In fact, he was directly responsible for the killings of at least 220 people. After murdering someone with his own hands, he would carve KK on their bodies. This is because he was paid to kill policemen and civil servants, and he wanted to prove to Pablo that he was responsible for the acts. He didn't just murder for duty. This man simply enjoyed the acts of murder and torture. He unnecessarily skinned his victims while they were still breathing and castrated some before taking their lives. He would also randomly shoot any police officers he saw and claim the infamous $4,000 reward that Pablo offered to cop killers. During his time working for the cartel, he was taken into custody multiple times for theft charges, but never for murder. This was no real problem for him, as he simply bribed his way out or escaped by himself. Back then, Colombian prisons were about as safe as an unlocked house. Reportedly, he once paid the authorities $500,000 to have an entire prison sentence removed from his records. On another occasion, he traveled all the way to Miami to